Just answering questions to LabTech. We have a couple of questions, actually assertions in one of them. How much of Fomenko's work have you reviewed? If a person spends their entire life studying butterflies, and then one day decides to study Freemason astrology Terminator robots, I don't care about the previous work unless it affects it. But here we go with the beginning of the beginning. Nikolia Alexandrovich Morozov, at the age of 92, based on astronomical records from a specific source, he speculated that much of human history had been falsified. His theories about the chronology of the Middle East and Israel before the 1st century BC later attracted the attention of Anatoly Fomenko, who based his own new chronology on his work. Now, I'm going to bring up a really simple thing here. If you find a single source that contradicts every other bit of information, it's useful to do a comparison. It's not useful to throw it out and try to prove that one source is better than the others, unless there's some very compelling reason. And again, I'm going to repeat, Nikolai based it on astronomical records specifically, and made a speculation that most of it had been falsified. That's a little bit much, other than just saying maybe the astronomical records were incomplete, had assumptions in them, or maybe you're looking at a bad translation, which is what you usually find. This is called creating a concordance. Far be it from an atheist to bring up concordances in the Bible, but that futile activity, because they are all separate stories brought together as a collection of stories and books, hence the name Book of such and such. Making them all make sense when these people may not have had any contact with each other means that you're trying to invite the problem that maybe they just used a different calendar or got the dates wrong, or maybe somebody mistranslated it later, instead of saying it must be inerrant. It is not inerrant, it's a collection of works, and 80% of the works are called Apocrypha and are not included because they couldn't make them make sense with each other. Demanding that a set of information cannot have any errors in it means that you're setting yourself up to create them. Anyway, Nicolaier started doing this, and let's see what happens later. Anatoly Fomenko, who arguably, or maybe inarguably, was involved in trying to help Soviet Russia, Communist Russia, spin doctor facts, was put to work doing analysis of contemporary Western newspapers and trying to spin them to match up with a preconceived set of notions. That's the hard way of saying it. The other way of saying it is he's a mathematics person, but his job was to do historical revision for the Soviet regime that was lying all the time to their own people, just like what happens in China. Well, that's an opinion. No, it fucking isn't. All the things you can say, no. So his original job was a propagandist. He created unpersons. He's a good example of that guy at that table in that box editing people out, which is the actual meeting for 1984. Russian, born in 1945, Soviet Russian mathematician, professor at Moscow State University, well-known topologist, and a member of the Russian Academy of Science, author of pseudoscientific theory called New Chronology, based on the previous person, also a member of the Russian Academy of Natural Sciences. Now you can read the biography. I'm using the Wikipedia article as a short way of doing it, but I've already gone through this guy several channels ago. He did mathematical work and then did historic revisionism for the Soviet Union. At some point, he became obsessed with the idea that the entire history of mankind was skillfully falsified and purposed, and decided to use his own methods in contemporary study on ancient events. But the irony of this is he's literally living in a machine where his entire job is to, and I'm going to read the quote again, falsify skillfully the current history being made of mankind so that Russia government can be happy. So he decides the rest of the world must be falsified. Did I just blow a hole in this? His perspective on the world was everything's fake until he's analyzed it. And he decided that everything has to be fake because, remember, he's in an entire environment and part of the machine creating it that distorts reality for political purposes. We've always been allies with East Asia. We've always been enemies with East Asia. What are you talking about? Here, let me cage a rat to your face. Why? Why this guy? I'm going to read a little bit more of the Wikipedia article just for a minute. He simply ignores many written sources as if they are biased media, and it is usual for the contemporary media to copy and reprint with minor copy editing some stories originally published by others, implying that if the original source itself is biased, then its renderings of other sources are no better. And multiplied by language barrier and broken telephone effect, they only add to confusion already inaccurate picture. Or, and I'm going to use this projecting on me, I'm citing old sources and new sources to see if they match. And if they don't match, I assume there's an error and I try to suss it out. And we're all stuck with the same problem. So is he. But that's not his point. That's not where he came from. He came from looking up news media in the Western world, reporting news, and trying to find a way to undo it. He had a moral dilemma where he's sitting there creating propaganda and decided to assume all history is propaganda. You might hear this argument from people who scream, the West or the East are biased, or the East is better, or I don't like Western medicine. That refers to anything west of basically the Mediterranean, not the United States. The new progressive Western civilization that had the habit of spreading ideas that caused the United States, patriotism and independence and not having kings run things. And then you get countries like the Philippines where they want to have a kingdom again so fucking badly because they don't like that they're miserably poor and think that having a king and an aristocracy is going to fix it. Or in the United States, where we're so terrified of our own shadows that we're willing to be tracked 24/7 with our cell phones, which is literally happening because you enable it. Anyway, this guy was back in the before time, living behind the Iron Curtain at the time, most likely, doing this work. And he decided that all history has to be fake, or it's an opinion. Or he's just trying to rationalize his position in this big machine that he was stuck in. Anyway, oh, by the way, the Wikipedia article is heavily biased against him. I already acknowledged that. It's very, very mean towards the guy. I'd rather have his own work to read. But anyway, this is just going to be a quick video on the subject. He dated accurately by matching things with natural events at the time, like eclipses and eruptions, cross-referencing various eyewitness accounts, with some of his colleagues agreeing that indeed certain historical events require a very careful re-examination based on methods which became available in today's cutting-edge technology. He goes further and tries to examine entire history. And yet, his own work contradicted eclipses, eruptions, and a bunch of other things because he threw out some things he didn't like. A supporter of drastically revising historical chronology, created his own revision called New Chronology based on statistical correlations and math, dating of zodiacs and the examining of mathematics and astronomy involved in chronology. Claims that he has discovered that many historical events do not correspond mathematically with the dates they're supposed to have occurred on, or somebody just made the date wrong. It's an error, not on purpose. Assuming a conspiracy is the easiest way to empower yourself to defy be the Don Quixote against windmills and stuff. By the way, coincidentally, one of the Don Quixoteisms these days is hating on windmills. I think that's funny. Next. Thank you, Stefan. The familiarity I have with him is trying to suss out why he made assertions and assumptions that are easily double-checked in his time as being wrong. He seems to have wanted to make the world a specific way. I can't really figure out which one it was, and I gave up trying. I couldn't find out his main motivation. The only thing I can see here is he worked in the propaganda machine in Russia, and it affected him in such a way that he had to make a couple of decisions. Am I part of what causes fake history or fake news, or am I not? Think about it if you worked at Fox News. You're literally shackled by the owner of the Fox News industrial complex thing to always prop up conservatives, even if they say shit you hate. You're a whore. And you're put through this constantly. It's a 24/7 existence. It's a cult. And you either turn into a blithering idiot talking head like most of them, or in this case with our own president, hiring them because they all kowtow to him. They don't defy him. You have to be loyal to me. Well, thank you very much, Caesar, but I'm afraid the staircase is waiting for you. This kind of shit is very, very toxic and very pernicious. In the following link, Didier Raoult, the guy who claims that he can cure COVID-19 and has a study that disproves it, because the study's crap, explains that he's been writing on the efficacy of hydroxychloroquine as an antiviral treatment for 25 years. That means that is his personal theory. It's not listed as being useful against viruses at all. It's useful against the symptoms, and it's listed as an anti-malaria drug. Malaria isn't a virus. It is caused by a microbe, more like a bacteria, but it's mostly a parasite. And the effects of it cause you to have inflammation reactions and overreactions, and it's a lot more like you gain an immune system problem, and it has an effect on that, and lupus and various other things. But it hasn't been shown to be useful against viruses, and if he spent 25 years failing to prove that it works against viruses, are you going to say that he's proved it all along? Here we go. If someone can't prove something for 25 fucking years and it's their pet project, two choices. Admit that you can't prove something and just stop that. Keep going and admit you can't prove it yet. Or just lie and say you've proven it because you're tilting at windmills. This drug is effective against 4 previous coronavirus species. It helped the symptoms. It didn't kill the virus. Never brought to clinical trials. Those were the clinical trials. And again, 2 of them he did were fucked because he wouldn't do them correctly, because he defiantly says, I will not use science-based medicine, double-blind studies, and control groups. Even though in every single case so far, it hasn't been life-threatening conditions. It's been mild cases, so it'd be easy for him to have a control group because the majority of them aren't going to get sick enough to die at all. Especially with this disease. It has a very low death rate compared to what you might think. I mean, it is 3%, but that's not adjusting for the fact that we have millions of people who probably haven't been diagnosed for it because it had no symptoms, which he acknowledges, which means there's no ethical reason that he would have for not having a control group, and he avoided it in one of the 2 tests he did for specifically COVID-19. He is a shit scientist. He won't prove his point because he knows he can't. That was never brought to trial through all those epidemics, but it was effective in 4 of them. Do you understand how stupid that just sounded? I'm not actually misquoting you. No wonder he suspects the fix is in. No, it's because he keeps saying it's an antiviral when it literally just treats the symptoms, not the virus. It's not a cure for the virus. It treats the symptom. It has the effect of reducing inflammation responses and inflammatory responses and your reactions and makes it easier to survive. The trouble is, it also, and he won't acknowledge this, has a problem with people's hearts. It can damage their heart or kill them. You have to test them for sensitivity first, and if they are sensitive, you can't use it. He doesn't listen to that. He doesn't give a shit if he kills his patients at this point. The FDA, CDC will not ever approve it as an antiviral drug because it's not a fucking antiviral drug. It's not. He's wrong. He spent 25 years proving to himself he's wrong and won't acknowledge it. I want you to show me a study where it was effective in a person against a virus and demonstratively true with control group, with double blind, without trying to falsify. He rigged the test and it failed. What worked in the most recent one that we can even acknowledge was an antibiotic. An antimicrobial helped because it prevented you from getting a bacterial infection. When the virus hurt you, you're more weak so that you can get a bacterial infection. This is something everybody knows about. Turbo Jones don't post anymore. And no, I'm not going to link to the video until he fucking acknowledges he's never been able to prove that it's an antiviral. Or he needs to stop saying antiviral and just say it helps symptoms. If he wanted to help people, he'd stop being stubborn about it and admit that he's failed to prove something. Or you show me that it's really an antiviral. Nobody's even bothered to hand me that link. Or tell me what the name of the study was. And the last 2 studies he did weren't studies, they were travesties. He defiantly won't do these tests because he found out over the last 25 years he can't prove his pet theory. This might actually work against some viruses. Show me proof it does. It might. All sorts of things could work that way. But refusing to show it to me and championing this guy as some sort of Don Quixote. Bullshit.